So we are here to talk about, in the corner booth, the work of Kat Hammons. Kat Hammons is an actor and writer born and raised in Ogden, Utah. Her acting career includes the award-winning film For When You Get Lost and a variety of television shows such as Yellowstone and The Big Bang Theory. Along with her writing partner, Andrea Gionis, she has written Valentine's Town, a movie currently in the process of distribution. She has written a variety of things for Foley Mara Studios, including short films and fiction podcasts. She also has a podcast with co-host Kira Groves called Rapatata. Kat, welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be super cool. Kat and I go way back. We've known each other a long time. When I heard that you, because you've always been an actor with just a tremendous voice and I think amazing comedic timing. So I've been a fan of yours since way back. I won't say the year, but way back.
Yeah, no need to go into all that.
Right. But when I heard that you were screenwriting, I said, "Oh, no, we got to get her on the show." Because I took some screenwriting classes. I'm a terrible screenwriter, and I would love to know how to do it properly. So.
Oh, well, when I find out, I sure will let you know. I'll send you something. But, yeah, it's very funny. Recently, I was back home helping my dad clear some stuff out of the garage and everything, and I found this letter to myself that I had written in 7th grade. You know how you had that assignment, and then you open it when you're a senior in high school. And so I found this letter, and my fondest desire at that time was to be a writer. That's for sure what I was going to do. I was absolutely 100% in 7th grade aware that I was going to be a writer. And then I started writing, and it's really hard. And so I decided to go for the easier thing, of course, which is acting.
Oh yeah, right. That's really. When I was telling someone that I was starting to write again after a very long period where I wasn't, and they knew that I was an actor, and they were like, "Are you just not getting enough rejection as an actor that you want to just kind of pile it on with some acting, with some writing?"
Yeah, and the answer is yes, of course.
Of course. Give it all.
Yeah,
let's see how low we can get.
That's it.
So
huzzah!
Huzzah, indeed. I love it. So one of the things we try to do with our show in the corner booth here is to provide kind of tips or strategies or tools you can take out of the tool belt for our listeners so they can improve the quality of their writing. And very selfishly, I'm trying to improve the quality of my writing as well. So the fact that you've been able to work with a partner, I think is really interesting. And I'd like to ask you, how collaboration with a writing partner works. And also just the process of screenwriting and getting that in front of people, like pitching. So we have a lot to discuss that I think might be beneficial to our listeners. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think I want to start with having a partner, because that really is what kicked my writing into gear. And really, the main thing that got me writing with her is just kind of a bit of a shame spiral. And the reason I say that is because she's much younger than I am. And so she had been writing with lots of other people over time. And one day she was complaining, saying, I try and write with these people, and then they're always late, or they don't show up at all. And then we can't get together. And then everything gets really weird and everyone gets really possessive. And I was like, yeah, that sucks. And she said, well, so do you want to write with me? I was like, yeah, because I'm not one of those scumbags. So yes, I'll prove to you that I'm better. And so I kept coming to the meeting because I didn't want to be a jerk. I wanted Andrea to think well of me. And so that went on for years. Mm-hmm. And during the pandemic, we were writing once a week, basically, because we both said part of the problem is that when two people get together and start writing, they make what I consider an unreal schedule. Like, yes, we're going to get together every day and we're going to write for 5 hours and it'll be great. And that never happens. We knew that where our heads were on this. And when she had asked me to write with her, it was mainly to help her rework a script that she had been working on. And at the time that we were talking about it, it was a 1-act play. Then we tried to expand it into a screenplay. And then we came back to a really nice, tight 1-act play. And that took years because we were doing it once a week. And during the pandemic, I was doing a lot of stuff to get my career to move forward and everything like this. I went to something called the American Film Market online because they were doing the whole exhibition online. And I went in and listened to one producer who was like, we need all the Hallmark movie scripts we can get. Hallmark, Hallmark, Hallmark. And even they needed it so badly that the producer even held up his phone number and said, call me here, along with his email. And so I could take that hint. So I went to Andrea and said, we have this very deep, profound script about the father and his daughter and his need for her to forgive him for being an alcoholic. Or we could make money. What do you want to do right now? And so we decided, let's make money. And so that's what we decided to start doing. And we have our passion projects for sure. But right now we just need to get some points on the board. And so write what the people want to see.
That's really great.
Yeah. I mean, we struggle with this, the commodification of writing. And sort of, the old school term would be selling out. I'm sure there's a new term for it, but am I cheapening, the work that I'm doing because I'm doing something? Right. So like, how do you approach that? Because I'm sure that just from the subtext of what you're telling me is that, well, maybe you'd rather be working on other stuff, but what you're doing is valuable because you can turn it into cash. So, I mean, how do you approach that?
Well, I think there's just the real awareness of what Hollywood is. And Hollywood, it's funny because when people see it, it's a conversation about art and graphics and always about enormous amounts of money. But Hollywood from day to day is really about every picture is a little company with a product to sell. And so you might think for example, our father-daughter script seems like a good product to sell, but in and of itself, it wouldn't be because nobody knows who we are. And so then you have to start adding in value by saying, okay, well, we've attached this superstar to it, or we've convinced this director to go at it, or we've convinced this screenwriter to do a second pass. Then you start to add the value that makes investors more interested in it. And so for me, I just decided that until my writing is good enough that I have that script that's a passion project that people have to buy because it's so good, it hits every button, it checks every box, then let me practice my writing as I hopefully make money doing it. And so I practice that by doing these Hallmark type scripts, Lifetime type scripts. They're simple, they're formulaic, but I still am an artist. And so I still want to do it the best way that I can possibly do it because, it's still about entertaining the people. And so it's tempting to say, well, I'm just pandering, but it's like at the level that I'm writing, I still want a good script.
Yeah, and it's almost like an apprenticeship at that point. I mean, you're really kind of cutting your teeth and honing the craft so that you can be good enough when you sort of turn your attention fully to that passion project that really expresses who you are as an artist, then you're just better at that point. No, that's very clever.
I think one of the great things about it is if you're making these choices to make a film, like, if there's a way to make this money, I kind of every now and then I think about this interview that I heard with Gary Oldman where they asked him, like, why would you be in a movie like Lost in Space, this big, giant, big budget, huge film? And he's like, well, because it's paying some bills so that I can go and do the passion projects that I might not make as much money on. And so I think there's a real validity. I think that's really great that you're able to kind of do something that pays some of those bills to give you the freedom to turn that attention to those passion projects. So
it's very true. Very true. And it's funny. Apparently, Gary Oldman is just giving good advice all over the world. Gary Oldman came into an acting class I was in and was there in person. And, they open up for questions and I throw my hand up first and I say, you look like you were having so much fun in The Fifth Element. Can you tell me about that? And everybody looked at me like, he was JFK. He was Sid Vicious. Come on.
Yeah.
And I was like, shut up. He looked like he was having so much fun. And that as an actor, to be able to convey that fun while keeping your audience with you is an amazing skill. Screw those people. I'm still bitter, I guess.
Yeah, no, yeah. I love him in that movie.
What was his answer? Yeah.
His answer was something that has absolutely kind of transformed my own acting. He said, you're the expert on the character. Everyone else is an expert, and this is true on any given set. That's one of the things that can be intimidating at times, is in theory, every single person who's on the set is the best person for that particular job. And so everybody knows their job really well. My job as an actor is that I know about everything that I need to know about that character. And so Andrea and I are both have that in our minds very clearly when we write, because we're actors. And so we want to make sure that we're giving as much information or as little information, because it does depend. You give too much information in a script, then it almost is an example of how you don't trust the actor. They're not going to be able to find their way unless, you tie a rope around their finger and pull them along. And so you have to find that balance of how much information to get so that they can let their creative juices flow. And how much can you leave open to the actor, the director, the lighting. And so a screenplay is different from a book because you really have so many other people who need to fill in the details as well. And you have to give them the space to do it.
This one time I was running lines with a friend, actually a common friend of ours, with Scotty. And he had an audition. This is out in LA. And I think it was a scene from Jerry Maguire. And I hadn't seen the movie because it was a long time ago. It had just come out.
Right.
And I didn't understand. I was reading the Kelly Preston part when she's like, get it signed. And I didn't understand what the character was trying to accomplish. Like, I am mystified by how actors can read a screenplay and sort of understand or intuit, oh, this is sort of the emotional tone and resonance that I need to take up because this is what's really happening under the surface. All I see is the words. And I'm like, there are very few words here. What is this? And so I, made a choice when I was running these lines with him. That was a terrible choice because I am not an actor, and it kind of screwed him up. So how do you write a screenplay that gives enough for the creative people to say, I got it. I can run this. It feels almost like a baton handoff in a way.
Yeah, in many ways it is. I think I'll be quite honest about this. I think that Andrea and I still overwrite. There are two stages to a script. You have the script that goes to a production company and the readers within that company. Then there's the production script, which is a little different, pared down, not so many descriptions of location and all of that. And Andrea and I tend to write toward the reader. And so we do put down a lot of detail. We put how, she was taken aback, or her eyes her eyelids are drooping with exhaustion. These kind of literary ways of describing things, because we want the reader to get interested and excited and give it to their boss. And so we do put in a lot of detail. The area where we're trying as hard as we can, because we're in the midst of editing a script right now, is to pull back on the dialogue and not over-explain. That's another thing, that there has to be so much trust that, your audience has seen a movie before, maybe even two. And so they are familiar with the conventions of a movie. You don't have to explain certain things because we already have seen these things 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times, or we live these things. You don't have to say, I'm getting up and going to work now, and then watch someone take a shower and get dressed and grab their keys. We get that. And so that's another part of it. Like when you guys were talking about subtext, what makes something like that interesting, instead of talking about a person going to work, is what's happening in their environment, what's happening with them emotionally as they're getting ready to go to work.
Right. And like the expectation that if the writer does linger on these seemingly trivial activities, it should raise the question in the reader's mind, why? Why are we doing this? And it should be, that sort of, oh, okay, I'm meant to read into this. So like one good example could be, let's say a character has opportunities to interact with other people. They go to the bank, they go to the gas station, whatever, and they purposely avoid interacting with someone. And that's the point of that sequence, at these three different intervals, and it might even be, hey, great weather we're having today, aren't we? And the protagonist just sort of turns away and walks away, and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? It kind of heightens that mystery. Yeah.
That's right. And I have to admit, this is, nowadays I'm starting to feel like the grumpy old lady who's telling the kids to get off her lawn as she throws back whiskey all afternoon, because there are so many movies that I've seen of late where it seems like scenes happen, but they don't add to the story. They just happen and then they kind of wander away. May December, which is a movie everyone is really championing, and I understand the acting is superb in it, but really at the end of May December, I felt like the screenplay just got distracted and decided to go and look out the window and see what was going on in the street. And it's like, oh, so we're done? Oh, okay. And because there was just no sense of, especially after they've created this beautiful thing that, and the tension that feels like it's going to something and then it goes nowhere. So I am still of the writing school where if you're going to bring up this thing, because in that movie, for example, one of the leads, his thing was butterflies. If you're going to bring up this thing about butterflies, if you're going to make it such a big deal, it better pay off. It's
Right.
Chekhov's gun. If you're going to have it, if it's on the set, it needs to be fired by the end.
Yeah. There's always if you're making a promise to the audience, you need to kind of follow through with it in some way. And that's something that I love about it. I have a background in narrative improv theater, and that was always something that was stuck with us. The Chekhov's gun thing. If you have a gun in the scene, it has to go off. If there's a big red button on a console, it has to be pushed. And that's kind of one of my favorite things to see in movies is if someone makes me a promise early on and then it gets paid off at the end. So that's great.
It actually, I was watching something today. It's on Netflix, The Tourist. Have you guys seen this show?
No, not yet. That's one on the list.
Yeah. So I won't blow it for you, but I've only seen the first episode, but there's a thing that occurs in the first scene that is very obviously something that will come back by the end of the episode. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's really cool. I wonder how that's going to play out. And when it does play out, it pays off really, really well. So, I mean, it's easy to spot those things, especially if you're a writer kind of coming to it as deconstructing other people's work, trying to see what's working in other people's work so you can carry it into your own.
Yeah. I mean, in this time of kind of the golden age of TV, the first golden age was in the early 90s when, you had The Sopranos. HBO was making itself known as a great purveyor of great television. Now we're in this one because of streaming, and there's such a burning need for content that you have a lot of literary writers who are also writing screenplays, and you see that, you can hear that in the words that are being used. They take more time because on a streaming service, I mean, it's an animal that can never be fed enough.
It's true.
And so you can do crappy movies and find someone to play them. But again, if you're doing your best, then you'll find someone who will stream your movie. And so you'll hear that beautiful dialogue. You'll hear those gorgeous descriptions a little bit more than you used to hear when it was just, movie and cable and network that you could only find your jobs for.
Yeah, the hunger for content has opened a lot of doors. Do you feel like that's provided you an opportunity as a screenwriter?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't doubt that for a second. Is that now, there's another side to that. I mean, there's a reason that the writers struck this summer. Hollywood still wants the very best writers. And so it used to be you'd have a writer's room where you'd have the writers, you'd have writer's assistants, you'd have apprentices. I mean, it was a whole thing. And then with streaming, especially because of the pandemic, now you have one guy and he's going to write because apparently nobody can get any energy up to do more than 10 episodes now. He'll just write all the episodes. No big deal. And he'll make some changes. We're not going to pay him for those changes. He doesn't get any residuals from this because we still, multi-billionaires, haven't figured out how we can pay anyone. It's weird. And so while there's great opportunity, once I really get on the other side of this, like once I've sold more scripts and really feel comfortable with it, then I really have that awareness that I need to make sure and get on the right side of writers, because writers do get kind of short shrift in Hollywood. For the longest time, writers didn't have a union. For the longest time, writers didn't get residuals. For the longest time, writers weren't even allowed on set. And so, there's a good reason why writers have unionized, because it all starts. That's the foundation. I mean, it's great that you have all these other people willing to show up and act and direct and light your movie and everything. But what movie? Oh, you mean that thing, that guy who we set the dogs on at the gate? He wrote that? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm thinking about, I remember Ernest Hemingway saying that, I'm pretty sure it was Ernest Hemingway who said the best way to deal with Hollywood as a writer is to walk to the California border, throw your script into the state, and then walk away. But it's so much different now. Do you feel like you're still part of the process once the script gets sold?
Well, that's interesting. The script that we sold was Valentine's Town. And it, of course, the calculation that went into that is there are all these Christmas movies. We might get overlooked if we write a Christmas movie because we've never written this before. Oh, we'll write a Valentine's movie. That's it. And so we wrote this Valentine's movie, and it was so interesting because we got privileges that we know other writers don't normally get, because this was a friend of a friend producer. And so you ask the question of how do you pitch? You just keep making as many relationships as you can in many ways. You know, we knew we weren't going to get paid much on this movie because it was non-union all around. It was being shot in Florida because of the tax credits, all of that. But he was incredibly generous in terms of having us on set. Like, he flew us out to Florida so we could be on set. And beforehand with the process, he gave us like first and second rewrites. That's something that's negotiated in a contract, is because really once someone options your script, you're done. Like, unless you have something in the script saying you have the first shot at the rewrite, which is pretty common. Sometimes you even have the last shot at the rewrite, which is less common. That's, you know, up there, the Christopher Nolans of the world and his brother who does stuff too. So we got the first couple of rewrites, and then they took it over and they did the rewrite. And I'm so grateful they produced our movie. I'm so grateful they gave us the opportunity to be on set and see it. And I feel that some of the choices that were made are possibly indicating why we're having a hard time selling the script
or
the movie.
Oh, no. So the adjustments may have made it less desirable as a product, maybe?
Yeah, I think that perhaps, we don't know, but I feel as though some of the changes might have flattened out the conflict. And in the end, that's what it's always about.
Yeah.
Every children's movie about learning to be a better person is about conflict. I mean, this is the point of movies. There's a conflict, something's gone wrong, it has to be corrected. And so, you know, this idea that it's Hallmark movie and so they don't like conflict is insane. They don't like, you know, people on crack on Hallmark.
Right.
But they don't mind conflict. And so I feel like that was possibly, I'm still being very clear that I'm filled with gratitude and please buy another script from us. But there possibly might have been a little more flattening than was beneficial to any of us, because this movie is shot now. And so it needs to get sold so that somebody can make some money. And so they might have shot themselves in the foot. But in answer to your question, in general, once a script is sold, it's out of your hands. Actually, once a script is optioned, it's out of your hands, depending on what you've written in the contract. And then once the option turns into a sale, they can do whatever they want with it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there's two things that I have to think about that. One, what a brilliant move to think, all right, there are a ton of holiday movies. Why don't we make a Valentine's Day movie? Which leads me to think that maybe the three of us can just write a romance around Black Friday, maybe. Perhaps,
or I was thinking Arbor Day. Like we could do
Arbor Day,
Arbor there, God, it's me, art, you know, that kind of thing. We could.
You guys,
it writes itself.
Geniuses. These are $1 million ideas. Let me talk to my manager. I think we can get something going.
I love it.
But the other thing about it is, you know, once long ago, I don't write a lot of script. I've written like maybe 3 plays in like 50,000 years, and none of them have had like a third or fourth draft. But I did present a play to an artistic director once of a theater that I had worked with, and he said, "This is great, but I need you to cut out 3 characters."
Yeah.
Part of me was wondering, well, why don't I just do this? Because I need to rack up the points. I need to get my name out there. And if this becomes a thing, at least I have something to point at, even if it's not really what I want, which, you know, seems like you're kind of cutting, you know, your own artistic integrity away, but you're making moves in the direction that you want to be. Have you ever been faced with challenges like that?
Oh, sure. With Valentine's Town, definitely. They saw it. They said they loved it. Think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And can you cut out about 5 characters? And
And can you have it happen on Arbor Day?
Exactly. And can you also, because, oh, I'm so sorry. No phone calls. The hell is this? Amateur hour. Airplane mode.
It's Hallmark. They're like, what did you just say about?
Exactly. The Hallmark Stasi is out.
That's
big
Hallmark.
Around. Big Hallmark is listening.
Exactly. Big Hallmark is right here, right now. TV for Women is the other one. You got to watch Lifetime and Hallmark, man. They don't play.
Look, we always call those movies what bad men do to good women. So, just
that is exactly
it. Just be on alert, because when you get a mysterious phone call in the middle of a podcast, that's usually the commercial break, and then we're coming back to some trouble.
Oh gosh, yeah. That's one of the things. Andrea and I are working on a script now, where of course it has this just precious young woman who's being taken advantage of by a scumbag man, and it's so funny what the kind of the guidelines are for something like Lifetime. I mean, she can be menaced, she can be frightened, she can, in the real world, this is a person who would probably need to have a sleepover at a mental facility by the end of this movie. But you can do all of that, but don't include anything supernatural. No tarot cards, no be a witch, none of that.
No cosmic horror.
Oh. No cosmic horror, none of that. It has to be a dude.
See, we could do like a Hallmark version of Twin Peaks. Then we're talking. Like, that's going to be it.
That would be amazing.
I was making some notes when you mentioned that you were writing with a partner, and that's something that I'm just mystified by. So is there any kind of like ownership or possessiveness that creates tension or conflict between you and a writing partner? The reason I ask is that I think I would find it hard at first to collaborate because creative visions might not be aligned. How do you guys handle that?
I've had that problem with many partners. Actually, that's a problem that Kira and I had, which is why we stopped writing together, although I think we're going to start again, is because there was a sense of this is how it has to be. And a lot of times it was like that because Kira had come up with the idea, and so she had a sense of what she wanted, which is great. But with Andrea and I, she has projects she's working on. I have projects that I think I'm going to someday work on. And so what we do together is pretty much a co-creation, meaning there are no particular ideas that we have in mind. We'll just be kicking around some ideas and then start saying, okay, yeah, it feels like this one can do something. And so it really is created by the two of us in our meetings. And so for that reason, there's just nothing about the plot that I'm attached to. I just want it to go in the right direction. And Andrea's the same way. My creative voice, her creative voice, for these particular projects, it doesn't matter. I'm not saying some message to the world. Now, it helps that Andrea and I have basically the same values. We're not going to write a bunch of racist stuff. We're not going to write a bunch of homophobic stuff.
Right.
And so we have the same values. The ideas that we create together. We don't go off by ourselves and create anything. We create together and we write together. And so that's how we avoid it. And we have, we're very polite people. And so we really hear each other out and say, okay, and great idea. And I have another idea to either extend it, or maybe I don't see it working in that direction because of this. It's just a real respect for each other. And I think sometimes working with other people, there's a lot of defensiveness, like I am writing with another friend of mine. And we still have to work through defensiveness and actually an ineffective use of time. We're still trying to figure ourselves out that way. One of the problems when we wrote with other people is that the time would just expand. We would say, okay, we're going to write for this long, and it would just turn into a day-long thing. That was true with Kira and I, because we're friends, and so we'd have all this chit-chat, and then you still want to write for 2 hours? Oh, no. We used all that time to talk about boys. And so with Andrea and I, we just say 1 hour, and it's 1 solid hour of writing. Now, we've gotten so much faster than we used to be. It went from taking a year to write a script to taking half a year to taking, basically we're at about a month and a half, 2 months for a rough draft. And if we wrote more than an hour a day now, that's how much we write now. If we wrote more than an hour a day, we'd probably have even more.
So give me an idea of what that writing session looks like, because I think I had come into this with the incorrect point of view, which was that you were each sort of working or developing separately, and then you came together to compare notes and see what the direction was. What you're telling me sounds more like you sit down in a room with her and you both write at the same time. Is that how it works?
Basically, we're on Zoom every day for an hour. And so at the beginning, when we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the next thing that we want to write? Because there have been people who've come to us and, said, write this script, and they went and presented it and didn't sell, like some stuff that was for Hulu. They say, not now, times have changed, blah, 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 which is happening all over Hollywood. But what we do is we kind of say, okay, what kind of stories can we tell? Sometimes we have an idea that someone has come to us and said, this is the idea and we want you to write it. And other times we don't. But either way, we say, what's the best direction for this story? And so we'll just start throwing ideas back and forth. So basically, if I were to do this with you guys now, I would say, I have this idea that there is a woman who lives alone on a farm, and she's being stalked by someone. And then Andrea would say, yeah, she's being stalked by someone who maybe used to own the land and feels like this woman got it illegitimately. And so we would just keep building like that.
We could do that right now, I'll bet.
I was about to say, you want to do it?
I kind of do, yeah. I was thinking it would be fun if she were being stalked by a child, sent by someone else for whatever reason. But that would be kind of a nice little twist. You think it's going to be this, nefarious dude, and it ends up being this 8-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. And nobody believes that this is happening. In fact, people are kind of concerned that this woman has so much animus, A, to a child nobody has seen, and B, to a child. And so the townspeople are starting to kind of back away from her.
All of my ideas had ghosts in them, so no Hallmark for me.
All right. Well, we're gonna sell this to Tubi then. No, we're not gonna sell it to Tubi. We're gonna sell it to Shudder, AMC.
There we go.
Shudder. So yeah, it's a Shudder movie. So yes, go for it, ghosts and such.
There we go. It's the ghost of the child that she murdered. No, I don't know. Now we're getting crazy. Now I gotta go sleep.
No bad ideas.
No, actually, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Maybe I just the child she killed, and she doesn't realize that she herself has died. The guilt keeps her coming back to this place in this moment in this child, and she doesn't understand why.
That'd be good.
Done. Like I'll just sign the residual checks from here on out. Thank you very much.
Hey, we still have 57 minutes. So it seems like if you're riffing like that and you have a high level of trust with your writing partner, that you could probably rough out the outline, the beats of a story within a few sessions. Is that about how long it takes you to kind of get the sort of structure of the story?
Yeah, and we use this software that I found several years ago called Contour. And what Contour does is basically asks you questions. There's another piece of software that I use as well that does about the same thing, except it's more towards literature, writing books and such. So what this basically does is the first question asks is, who is your main character? What do they want? Who's trying to stop them? What happens if they don't get what they want? And so it uses the example of Star Wars. Who's the main character? Luke Skywalker. What does he want? Luke Skywalker wants to defeat the bad guys, ultimately. How does he do it? He becomes a Jedi and trains and all of that good stuff.
That's interesting.
Yeah. For this particular program, the action that actually is going to appear on the screen, not the psychological stuff yet, but the action.
What a great program. That seems like such a great thing to sort of nail down a lot of pieces to a narrative that you initially might not think about. That's great.
Right. And then, after you get through those first initial questions, then it starts asking you, basically it's going off of archetypes. So then it talks about how is this character an orphan in Act 1? How are they a wanderer in Act 2? How are they a warrior in the second half of Act 2? And then how are they a martyr in Act 3?
Huh.
Okay, I get it now. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it keeps going through that, and then it starts to ask yes and no questions. Basically, the character is succeeding, and then they're not succeeding, and then they're succeeding, and they're not succeeding. And you go back and forth with how they're getting closer and further from their goals until you get to the end of the script, where you answer a big yes, success, or a big no, failure. I work with Foley Mara Studios. We're a group of people who shoot a bunch of short movies and do podcasts. Like we did something called Quiet Please, which I love, which were actually an old podcast from back in radio days, and I love it. And then I wrote some podcasts. I guess I'm the creative director of the group. So when other people start writing scripts, I take a look at them and see what's going on. And one of the things that's always so hard is when someone who's new to screenwriting, it's very hard for them to understand that with movies, it's about the action. Now, TV is about the characters. Movies are about the action. And so when I think, for example, about George Lucas, when he started writing Star Wars, he had basically an action already in place. There needed to be some heroic act. Star Wars is very much the hero's journey, first and last. And so he lays out what the actions are. Then he can start to say, who are the characters that will get to the action? So you have a sense of who the characters are. Obviously, you started with your main character. But then you go from action to action, not from thought to thought. You get to that. I also have another piece of software that helps you kind of develop characters, because you say who your protagonist is, you give them a particular archetype, then the software will say, well, this is what the opposite of that archetype is. Do you want to use any of these archetypes for your antagonist? And so it's all very automated.
Yeah, but it's not Chat GPT, just to be clear. You're not.
Oh my God, no.
Just wanted to say it out loud. Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I tried Chat GPT. I was like, this is so boring. You suck. And so, yeah. No, it really is one of those things, especially working with a partner. It has been so helpful because then you know you're on the same page. You know, moment by moment, what you're supposed to be doing, so that when we get to the process of actually writing the script, one of us will have an idea about how we want to start. So like Andrea will start typing. And because we have this beautiful outline that was created by Contour, I can jump to the next scene and continue. And then she can jump after and continue. Yeah. Then we go back and tie it all together.
Well, what's amazing about that, and I think you guys are very clever for using that tool and having that framework before you really start writing, is that you've already agreed through these identical prompting questions on what the answers are. And I think if Tim and I tried to do some writing and we didn't have that framework, the risk is that, I would come in and want to write, a sci-fi epic, and Tim might want to do a murder mystery. And then we're already in conflict and we're 5 minutes into the exercise. So I really like the way that you've kind of shaped up this collaboration, where first you're going to do the outline and we're just going to answer the questions and agree on the answers at that granular level so that we have an outline that we both sort of have bought into. And then you're just kind of fleshing it out, putting meat on the bone. That's very clever.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It really helps. There are times when we've gone really deep on a character, and mainly we went really deep on a character because we need to get a strong sense of their backstory. Like we wrote a script about a man with a dark past. And so we had to know what the dark past was, because the dark past turned out to be the primary problem of the movie. And so we do a lot of backstory as we're talking, and we take notes. So I guess the first thing that we do is kick around ideas. Then we take notes, like things that are coming to us about the character and certain scenes that we feel like we want to see, and whatever research we might have to do. And then we go to Contour, and then we go to the script. And so during that time when we're at the script stage, like I said, we're on Zoom together. One of us starts, the other one goes to the next and the next and the next and the next. We get to the bottom, then we go back and read it and, make our decisions as to how we can either bridge the two scenes that we've been working on, or we'll work on them together to come to a midpoint that we can both get behind.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What kind of tool are you using to capture what you're writing in? I remember using Final Draft on my computer, but I assume since you're both in different locations, are you working off of a Google Doc that you can both type into? Like, what's the machination of how you actually capture the work?
We use a website called Writer Duet. And with Writer Duet, it's specifically built for collaboration. So we're writing simultaneously. I can see what she's writing. She can see what I'm writing.
That is super cool.
That's really... When y'all get stuck on something, the fact that you guys sort of write in hour increments and you meet just for an hour, does that help because you're able to walk away from it and come back fresh the next day? Is it sort of inherent in the way that you've structured your writing practices that you don't really get too stuck on something because you're like, oh, I can walk away from this, come back tomorrow, it's fresh. You know what we should have added? We should have added a kid that's a ghost or something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Because it's an hour a day, and because, we'll have our sessions where we just sit and gossip and talk about the news and say, okay, well, so tomorrow we go back to writing. But because it's an hour a day, this is where Andrea and my personality work really well together. Because I get into these kind of thought spirals where I tend to complicate things. And I'm thinking, because if there's a question like, if some man decides to kill an ex-lover in a movie that we're writing, I'm very conscious of, but why? Like, what can we put in here? Like you're talking about, the little Easter eggs, the little clues. What can we put in here to make it clear that this person is capable of it? Not so much that the other characters can see, but that the audience can see. And so I'll get stuck in these ideas, and then I'll say, you know what? Let's start rewriting from page 1. How's that? And Andrea is very good about saying, I hear what you're saying, and I like it, but how about we just make it so that that character doesn't kill his former lover? Oh, well, I hadn't thought about it like that. Yeah, let's just do that.
Yeah.
If it's not moving the story forward, take it out. And so I tend to be the one who wants to keep adding stuff in and making things clear. And I'm always about adding more comic lines. And Andrea is very good about saying, but we don't have that in the outline. So if we don't have it in the outline, maybe we don't need it. And so that's very helpful. That's the other reason the outline from Contour is so helpful, is because we can go back and say, if we deviate from this, then all the rest of this is deviated. Are we cool with that?
And I'm imagining that has happened before, where you've made a fundamental shift away from a piece of the outline and it ended up working out fine. So it's not like you're beholden to the outline as, the tome of wonder from the mystic, land of Egypt.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, no. Usually we have to get it on paper. I think that would be the number one thing I would say to anyone. And that's the essence of your podcast. You just got to get it out first. You don't know what you have until you can read it. And so we stick to the outline for the first draft. Now we're going back through, and now we realize that there's some things that just don't make sense, some things that we have no support for. We haven't set any expectation for a character to behave in a certain way. And we also realize that, like, our villain isn't particularly compelling. We don't understand why he's doing this thing. And so the second round is where we start to deviate from the outline and feel comfortable really developing the characters and all of that stuff. But got to get it on the page first. Otherwise, it's all just theoretical.
Yeah, that's the thing I've noticed. I'm sure you've noticed this as well, Tim, where a villain has no rational reason for pursuing the protagonist or going through the machinations of the plot. It's like, why is this guy doing this? Because he's a mustache twirling evil villain in the corner, And I'm like, that is terrible. I don't want to watch that story. So I'm really glad that you're thinking about that, because I wish more writers would.
Thank you very much. Yes, I find so often you just have this, I'm just crazy. I'm just a crazy person. And I don't mind seeing crazy people do crazy people things.
Yeah.
But crazy people have a reason for what they do too.
Yeah.
And so it can't just come out of nowhere. It has to be something that drives them.
You're absolutely right. The operative word there is just. It's when he's just crazy, or he just wants her dead. It's like, well, you've just shown me that you haven't really given him a motivation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember, somebody once said as an actor that they were like, well, the bad guy thinks they're right. And that was, to me, such an interesting perspective on that. Like, this person thinks they're right, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a great example of that, and a common example, is the Joker from the Batman series, and we're seeing it now with Joaquin Phoenix. As far as the Joker is concerned, this is his movie. And the events that we're seeing are the culmination of his efforts, because he truly believes this is the best for me and really the world. The Joker believes that the annihilation of these institutions, the chaos, is the thing that will make the world free. Whoever James Bond current villain is, they're trying to take over the world because they think that will be the best thing that the world can get, is their leadership.
Exactly.
And so we always try to write characters with the recognition that they think this is their movie, and they think that what we are showing is them at the pinnacle of their leadership and their intelligence.
No, it's great, because then they become fully rounded characters, not just kind of a counterpoint to the protagonist, but they're their own real person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I absolutely love dialogue. I love writing dialogue. I love talking it out loud when I'm by myself or with others around. How does that come about for you as a writer and working with a partner? Do you guys work out scenes? Do you just sort of throw it down on paper? Because, you know, when you're writing different folks, you have to write them from different perspectives, of course. But then not only are you writing these characters, but there are also going to be actors who might interpret the words different. So how does dialogue come for you? And is it easy? And what do you enjoy about it? What do you hate about it?
Oh, I love dialogue. I think I am one of the cleverest people I've ever met. So, you just give me some dialogue. I will use all my $2 words, which I had to learn to stop doing that. And when it comes to writing a screenplay, my mentor in writing said it's like a musical. You know, in a musical, what happens is the person sings because there's simply no other way to express the moment. And in terms of dialogue in a movie, it's kind of the same thing. It's not the dialogue that drives the plot forward. It's the action that drives the plot forward. People are speaking because there's an action that needs to happen. And words are the way that action can happen. And so that's one of the reasons I really like writing podcast dramas as well, is because that's all dialogue and I can be as witty as I want to be. But when it comes to movies, it really, like if you're sending a movie into a producer or trying to get an agent or something like that, really they are looking at how much blank there is on the page, and the more blank, the better. Our movies are filled with dialogue, but again, that's Lifetime, that's Hallmark, where there's no budget for a bunch of sets. There's no budget for special effects or anything like that. And so it can be dialogue heavy. TV is dialogue heavy. But when it comes to movies, it really has to be about the dialogue becomes a necessity. And there are two examples of that. I'm glad you asked me that, because I wanted to mention this. Two examples of movies, modern movies, that have little to no dialogue. One is called No One Will Save You, which is on Hulu, which is... Yeah. And I got halfway through that before I realized there's been no dialogue in this.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's really fascinating to watch. And the other one is a movie called Silent Night that came out over the holidays. That's not about, a Silent Night killer, so to speak, but it's about a man whose son is killed because of gang violence. And so he wants to stop the guys because it's a drive-by shooting. He wants to stop the guys. He gets out in front of them and causes their car to crash. And he thinks that he's killed them, but he hasn't. And so one of the gang leaders gets out of the car and shoots him in the throat. And, that's like the first 5 minutes. So I'm not giving anything away. And then from that point on, there's virtually no dialogue in this really high octane kind of action movie. That's one of the things that you keep in mind when it comes to screenplay writing is these are two examples of movies that have virtually no dialogue. And yet there was a screenwriter behind them.
Yeah.
And so dialogue really is when it's a necessity. And it's a necessity, except for these two movies, it's a necessity. You have to have dialogue in a movie.
Yeah, I remember, I think Kurosawa once said that it was like films should be silent films unless you positively, absolutely need someone to say something. Wow. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Yeah.
Wow. And again, that is something that I'm trying to have a lot more faith in, because I did write a short film. I was in Italy several years ago, studying screenwriting and post World War II Italian cinema. And let me tell you, this isn't when I was a 20-year-old. This is when I was in my 40s. So it was cool, because grown-ups can take advantage of Rome in ways that kids can't. But anyway,
nice.
One of our assignments was to write a short based on what we were seeing around us in Rome. And so I wrote this. A man's wife was leaving him to go back to being a nun, because the guy I met there, that of course, it's like they assign you an Italian boyfriend as soon as you get off the plane. And so,
buongiorno.
Exactly. Hello, I am your lover. And so, he had such a rich backstory. The reason he had started to learn English is because he had seen this woman walking down the street and she was so beautiful. And so he flips his car around to go find her. I know those Italians. And he runs up to her, and she speaks very little Italian. He speaks no English at that time. Finally, they figure out how to communicate, and it turns out she had just stopped being a nun. And so I always thought of her as the ex-nun. And so I wrote this story where, and in addition to that, man, at the time I was on Tinder, because like you're going to show up in Rome with no dates. What's wrong with you? So I was on Tinder, and I would get these other men who were so nice and so flowery and so complimentary and so romantic. And then you would just ask flat out, "Are you married?" And they'd be like, yes, I am. And so there's just this kind of reverence for women that really becomes disrespectful in a big way. And so for this short film, I was writing about a guy who could only see women a certain way. When he looked at his wife, all he could see was the fact that she was this beautiful, glowing creature. Like, he couldn't see her face. He couldn't see her specific details. All he could see was a glowing creature. He looks across the street at the woman that he's having an affair with, and all he can see is this sexy, beautiful woman who always is wearing the low-cut dress and all that. And when the audience sees her, all they see is kind of, she's kind of pretty, kind of just a shabby little housewife. But all he sees is that. And whenever he sees little girls walking down the streets, all he sees is angels. And so the reason his wife is leaving him, because she says, "You can't see me. You see your idea of me, but you don't see me." So anyway, most of that was without dialogue.
Nice. Because
I really wanted the visual picture of him looking out and looking across the street, looking into the street, and only seeing all these angels.
Did you make that film?
I did not. I wanted to make it while I was there, but on one hand, like you were talking about, artistic integrity, and I want the script to be the way it is. And on the other hand, it's like, there's no CGI available to you, Summer Scroll girl.
Right.
What are we trying to shoot here? Yeah. And so I would love to come back to that, like when I have the opportunity, because I still think that is such a beautiful image, because he was such a nice guy, but he could only just see women in this kind of reverent way or highly sexualized way.
Yeah. Even as just a pure thought exercise, the act of writing that and visualizing it probably improved your writing overall. So, I mean, it certainly didn't go, it wasn't valueless. So that was really cool.
Cool. Thank you.